towncouncil@blacksburg.gov. Very easy. towncouncil@blacksburg.gov. Please let us hear from you and share your concerns from now on over this topic. I suspect that other local officials would welcome your input on what they can do as well. Would the elected officials in the room please stand so people can get to you maybe after this? Again, please do stand. Thank you. I would also like people to know that our superintendent of our Montgomery County Public School System is here. Could you please stand? And as you know, you cannot count on elected officials to do everything you need to do. We all must organize. We all must build on what's happening today here to enact state laws that will help us curb gun violence. Now say that with me. We want to curb gun violence. And I want to come back to that a couple of times. And we must organize, again, build on what is happening here today to enact federal laws that will help us curb gun violence. And an important part of this organizing is to get out the vote so that we can have elected officials at all levels of government who support legislation to curb gun violence. One of my favorite books is Lord of the Rings by J.R.R. Tolkien, because positive change occurred. The evil was defeated only because everyone, and everyone included not just humans, elves, ents, dwarves, hobbits, a wizard, all work together to create that change, to defeat the bad. Let us here in Blacksburg and in the New River Valley work with students of Parkland, work with each other, work with the people of our region and of our state and of our nation to stop this violence. Thank you all again for being here today. Together, we will end the violence.
Now, I would like to introduce to you all a young woman, a fantastic young woman, who is going to share her story of how her life has been affected by gun violence.
Hi, my name is Jada. I'm 12 years old and I am a survivor. I am part of the generation that will have to carry on the fight against gun violence. My dad was killed by gun violence. Our schools are being attacked by gun violence. What will you do today to make sure that both our neighborhood and our schools are safe? We must make our lawmakers responsible to ensure the safety of all our people in our society. Today I am making my voice heard. You will make your voice heard for. Will you make your voice heard for my generation? Okay, I'm done.
Thank you so much, Jada. And now I'm excited to introduce to you all the moderators for our Road to Change panel. We have Ms. Bria Smith, who is a student from Wisconsin, and our own community leader and activist extraordinaire, Ms. Holly Lesko.
Hello, Blacksburg. How are you guys doing tonight? Yes, the energy in this room is awesome. Like she said before, my name is Bria Smith. I'm 17. I'm a youth advocate in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, who joined the Road to Change tour to speak about inner city gun violence and how it affects lots of impoverished communities in brown and black neighborhoods.
Many of you know I'm Holly Lesko. I also am involved in the community. I've done a lot of facilitation in the area, and also through the dialogue on race and through the work that we've done related to our own shooting here on April 16th. Feel compelled to be here today too.
So that's a few quick intros for your moderators. Now we're going to open up to the panelists, and you're going to introduce yourself and answer the question, what brought you here today?
Hi, I'm Luis Garcia. I'm the student leader of Students in Action in the Roanoke Valley. And what brought me here today was that I had to continue making my voice heard, because if I'm silent on an issue that is impacting my life, then that means that I'm just falling to the role of the oppressor. So I just want to continue the fight to end gun violence.
Hello, my name is Ryan Deitch. I am a recent graduate of Marjory Stoneman Douglas High School in Parkland, Florida, and I am here on the Road to Change tour just to save people's lives.
Hello, my name is Ryan Wiesdock. I am the chair of the Green Party at Virginia Tech and also the press secretary for the Green Party of Virginia. And I'm here today to talk about an issue that I think kind of gets a bit neglected in these conversations, and that's the connection between mental illness and gun violence, and where that connection does and does not exist. So I hope to be able to talk a little bit about that in healthcare today.
Hi, my name is Lauren Hogg. I'm 15, and I'm going to be a sophomore next year at Marjory Stoneman Douglas High School in Parkland, Florida. And I'm here for two main reasons. I'm here because on February 14th, I lost 4 good friends, and I know if I was in the position that they are now, and they were here today, they would be doing the exact same thing for me. And my second reason why I'm here is because it shouldn't take a mass shooting for people to become concerned about this issue. And I think people need to realize that it's now or never. We need to stop this now so it affects no one else.
Hello, my name is Tallulah Costa. I'm a rising sophomore at Community High School in Roanoke, Virginia. I'm the co-founder of STAR, the Social Teen Activism Alliance of Roanoke. It's an upcoming alliance. And today I am here to speak about this issue, to speak about issues that affect my community, that affect my peers, my teachers, my friends, my fellow students. And as a student, I am angry, but I am hopeful. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Matt Post. I'm an 18-year-old organizer from Maryland, and I'm on the road to change because I don't think there's anything natural or preordained about 96 gun deaths a day. I do believe we can change things if we go at it together.
Hello, I am Jeffrey Prudhomme. I am the Vice President of the newly revamped Radford Young Democrats and a proud intern for the Flacavento campaign. And I also consider myself to be a Black Lives Matter activist, and in larger part, an activist for the broader progressive resistance. And I am here today because it's not enough to protest, we have to vote for the policies that we want. And I know that I have no doubt that if we turn the largest string of protests in American history into votes at the ballot box, the change we want can become a reality. Thank you.
My name is Ramon Contreras. I'm 19 years old. I'm from New York City. I'm the founder of Youth Over Guns, which is an organization dedicated to bringing more awareness to gun violence in Black and brown communities. The reason I'm here today is because 10 months ago, my friend was shot and killed in New York City. And that is happening way too often in Black and brown communities. And it is something that's not being paid attention to, and it's something that continues to be underlooked in the media. So I'm here to change that, and I'm here on the road to change to make sure that each story is being told and that each aspect and lens of gun violence is being shown to the world.
Can we give another round of applause for our awesome panelists today? Awesome. So our first question is directed to Lauren and Ryan. What are your goals for the summer on the road to change? Give a brief description of what March for Our Lives is all about.
So this summer, we have 3 main goals for our summer road to change. And we like to refer to it as REV. Registering yourself and your friends to vote. educating yourself on who's running, because that's so often overlooked and it's so important. It will not make a difference if you just choose D or R. You have to look into the person. You have to know what they want. And our last part of Rev is voting, because so often lots of people register to vote, but when the time comes, they don't vote. So voting for morally just leaders is what we're all about.
Now, I would just like to add to that, as well as the aspects of voter registration and voter education, and of course voting, as many people overlook that. We are trying to create these coalitions all across the country. We are trying to make sure that people can unite in this issue, because for too long we have been divided. For too long we have been oppressed by those who choose to not fight for the people, who choose to represent special interests over those who put them in power. And I think, as you can see by this stage, we are very well doing that here today, as we have people from Maryland, New York, from Milwaukee, Wisconsin, from right here in Blacksburg and the greater Virginia area. You can see that we are just gathering people from all over the country with all different viewpoints to show that this issue doesn't just affect one community. This affects all of us as Americans, and we have to stand as Americans.
Continue. Ramon and Matt, perhaps you can say something about how funding and quality of the public school system correlates to gun violence.
Yeah, so in an interview once, Coretta Scott King was asked about violence, and what she said was that, yeah, violence took Martin Luther King away from us, but what is often under-discussed and what we also need to talk about is something called policy violence. Laws and policies that deliberately hurt people and cause people to suffer or die. Gun violence is violence, but so is underfunding education, so is mass incarceration, so is cruel immigration policies. We cannot address gun violence without addressing systemic racism, systemic poverty. Our enemy here is violence before anything else, violence.
A lot of people don't know that New York City actually has one of the most segregated public school systems in the whole entire world, in the country. And in many communities in inner cities, that's a fact. A lot of black and brown students go to usually lower funded public schools than those who are white. And this sometimes creates a school to prison pipeline where you see more black and brown children going to schools that have more metal detectors, that have more security officers and police officers instead of guidance counselors helping students get to college, instead of trauma counselors helping children deal with the constant cycle of violence that goes on in their community, to help them go through the constant police brutality and them being targeted by police officers just because of the color of their skin. And when you put a child in a school and a system which is already crumbling, which is already targeting them, you don't allow that child to flourish. That child is trapped in a system that does not allow them to flourish. And when he leaves the school, he is back to the real world where he is targeted once again. And when you segregate the funding of public school system, you're obviously telling this child that he is less important than those who have more money, who come from a more wealthier community, and who have whiter skin. And that plays a big role in the cycle of violence in our communities of color, and it's something that needs to be fixed, and it's something that people need to start talking about when they talk about gun violence.
So the next question goes to our local students in the panel. What are the biggest obstacles to create change in your own community? Yes. What are the biggest obstacles to create change in your own community?
Greatest assets?
Biggest obstacles.
Obstacles, sorry.
Oh, but you can talk about assets.
One of the biggest obstacles that I'm facing right now for Students in Action is actually getting students out there and involved. It is hard being only like 4 students out of the Roanoke Valley that is willing to go up and speak. So if we show students that this is a bigger and important issue to talk about, then I think they'll notice that this is really, really affecting our community and our lives, because students and young kids, we just focus on ourselves. And if we see what others go through and what other communities have to face, and we'll know that this is a bigger issue than what we have to go through ourselves. But I think just reaching out to students from all over communities would be one of the greatest things that I'm trying to do, because Roanoke is a very diverse community and we are being affected in all communities. So I think I and other people here should reach out, and that's what we're doing. We're reaching out to all communities, to the ones who are left out of this conversation.
If I could add on to that, I would definitely like to echo Lewis's statements. But also I think a lot of students like to talk to each other about what's going on, about these massacres that have been happening. But unfortunately, not a lot of them like to get up and come on panels like these and like to come up and speak. And I completely understand, you know, being up here and speaking myself is an extremely nerve-wracking experience. But if we can't encourage our youth and say, it's okay, you can come up here and you can voice your opinion and you can speak, then we're not going to move anywhere, because we can look at these things on our smartphones and we can have discussions about these things in our close, small friend groups, but actually moving the conversation outwards into the world is even more important. And it's really important to have conversations with people with different experiences and different views. So I think that's also another big obstacle, is actually, right, just getting students active. Thank you.
I also want to add on to that is that it's really, a lot of students are very apathetic. Even though things are changing and everyone's starting to get more involved, it's not at the rate that it should be. And that's what we're working on day and night, is that, especially with Chris Hurst's campaign, is that I always said we treat it like it was an emergency. We did everything we could on social media, always alerting folks of the issues. Look at Puerto Rico, look at this and that, look at the border, things that are, I would say, national emergencies. And that's what we have to do, is to make people feel the urgency of the moment. You can't complain if you don't vote. It's not enough just to post. Yes, it's not enough just to post about these issues. We have to act. I know everyone's angry, but we can't just react. We have to create action. Thank you.
In my experience, one of the major problems to resolving gun violence, but in general, as a couple other people were talking about, violence in general, is just established political power. Oftentimes, people in these kind of things talk about the NRA, and they say, look, the NRA buys politicians, it writes laws that favor its interests, and not even the interests of most of its members, mostly Wayne LaPierre, and it's a kind of higher-up officials. But it's not just the Republicans that are taking that special interest money, it's also Democrats. And they're not only taking special interest money from the NRA, they're taking it from military contractors who build bombs that kill people overseas, in Yemen, in Gaza. We fund an $813 billion military budget, which in a lot of ways ends up building violence in our own communities. If you want to talk about police brutality and systematic racism as it relates to gun violence, you have to look at the fact that all of those military dollars that we're spending to kill people overseas ends up coming back to kill us, because we have to sell the extra to police forces around the country, which militarizes the police, which is why we have people running up tanks down I-81. You guys remember that? So we have that because we fund this huge military budget, and that's Democrats and Republicans combined. And so if we want to really challenge the political consensus on violence and gun violence, if we want to actually move the needle on that, people have to have the courage to move outside of that established political system. And that is also a very huge obstacle to this problem.
Okay, Lauren, How do you respond to the argument that the only way to stop a bad guy with a gun is with a good guy with a gun?
So something we like to say a lot when people tell us that is that when somebody comes up to us and tells us the only way to stop a bad guy with a gun is a good guy with a gun, it sounds kind of like they're just trying to sell us two guns. The thing is, there's been good guys with guns who haven't been able to stop bad guys with guns. At our school, there were good guys with guns, and they couldn't stop him. Recently, I don't know, I'm sure you guys have heard about the shooting that occurred at Trader Joe's, or the hostage situation at Trader Joe's in California. There was only one gun death from that tragedy, and it was because a good guy with a gun accidentally missed and shot somebody and killed them. So I think realizing that putting more guns onto the problem of gun violence is not going to solve anything. It's just going to perpetuate the cycle of gun violence.
I'd just like to add to that to say, when it comes to all of these instances, I mean, she cited the shooting at our high school, but I can also cite the first mass shooting that I had to watch unfold in my school, which was the shooting in Vegas last year, in which there were many men in that crowd that had firearms but were too afraid to pull it out in case of being accused of being a shooter. There was I believe it was a grandfather in Colorado this past week who defended his home from a home invader, in which afterwards the police officers came in and saw that he had a firearm and then shot him dead in his own home. And it's things like that that you have to realize, yes, firearms can be used for protection. And yes, nobody is saying that that should be taken away from an American. But what we are saying is that these people need to realize that it is beyond just good and bad. To boil it down to something so simplistic as that is fooling the audience into saying that we ourselves are not smart enough to see through it. That something like a good guy with a gun is a mythology. It is just this story that is being perpetuated, saying that anybody can live like it's the Wild West, that you can be a vigilante. And to that point, there was an individual in Salt Lake City that came up to me and very well fought for that, saying that should I carry a firearm on me at all times to protect those around me? And I said, are you a member of law enforcement? Are you a trained individual with that firearm? He said, well, no. And then I said, well, why are you trying to just shoot people anywhere in the street? And he didn't really have a good answer for that. And what we really just have to do is boil down that argument to exactly what it is, and it is exactly what Lauren said. They are just trying to sell us weapons. Plain and simple.
So the next question is for Ramon from New York. People think that all gun violence in inner cities is due to gangs, yet they have never even visited your neighborhood. What have you found true to be in your community?
When people refer to the gun violence in our community as gang violence, and when the media refers to it as gang violence, I just find that heartless. At the end of the day, someone is dying, right? And we should acknowledge the person who is dying, and we should pay attention to that. We should know that it's not gang violence killing our black and brown youth, but it's a system that's failing them every day. It's a system that's keeping them in a constant system of oppression and a cycle of violence that doesn't allow them to flourish. If we really want to talk about what's killing them, it is a lack of funding and investment to our communities and schools, it is poverty, it is hunger, it is a lack of health care within our black and brown families, and it is police brutality. And there's so many different system of oppressions that are stacked on top of the violence in our communities that people don't pay attention to, but people always like to refer to gang violence. They like to go to gang violence because it's simple and it keeps black and brown people in a place where, people don't really care. Every shooting in our community should be treated like a mass shooting. The other day in Chicago, I believe, how many people were injured? 6 people were injured in Chicago, and they were shot and killed, right? It was 6 people were shot and killed. I believe 18 were injured, right? And nowhere in the media was that treated like a mass shooting. But, school shootings, which are a tragedy, happen And the media likes to snatch on that quickly, and they like to cover it nationally and daily for weeks and on. But yet, when it happens in our communities every day, it's not covered the same. And, you know, we have to ask ourselves why, and it's because we live in a country that is still racist. And the only way to change that conversation The only way to change the narrative in that conversation is by continuing to do town halls like this, continuing to talk to different communities, continuing to do things like Road to Change, where we just don't have students from Parkland, but we have students from Milwaukee, we have students from Chicago, St. Louis, Houston, Maryland. We have students from all over the country speaking about gun violence through different lenses. And when we come here, it's not to just tell our stories and leave. It's to tell our stories and you guys to go to your neighbors and friends and tell them what you heard today. It's about educating your neighbors, and that's what democracy is about. It's about going out to vote and educating each other on the policies and stories around the country. And if we cannot do that, if when we leave today, we do not leave with some type of motivation to educate our peers, then we have failed you. And what we need to do is be participants in our democracy and share the story and make sure we change the narrative, because every day kids are dying. And it's up to us to change that.
Great challenge from Ramon to our local group, and kind of to follow up on that, one of the questions is about when often elections can be swung based on a particular voting group, and that 18 to 29 voting group often could make the difference. And trying to get people out to vote and planning to continue to inspire youth in your community, our local folks, what kind of advice do you give to those who want to break this social inactivism and elect just, morally just legislators?
I would say it's letting people know what is at stake, because even with the 2017 election, it was exactly the morning of would have been 1 year since the 2016 election, and I said there's no way that we're going to let the same thing happen, especially on a micro level. So I let people know, especially on these local and state levels, especially the local race that we recently had, is that if you have the power to actually shift it, where you have enough students where you can make the difference between if they win or not, you better make sure that you win. Even if students are still somewhat apathetic, but it's changing. Knock on as many doors, talk to every student that comes in your way, even if they said, hey dude, you talked to me like 4 or 5 times in the last 2 weeks. I'm like, well sorry, I'm talking to everybody I can. It's that important. Every election matters. Voting matters. Every vote can make a difference. We saw in one House delegate race where the House of Delegates would have been 50 Republican, 50 Democrats, where this one woman, she won by 1 vote, but it was contested, and in a coin toss, she lost. And if more folks had voted, she would have won. It would have been even control. So all I can say is, especially right now, is that if you care about issues, and I've learned it's through policy, it's through legislation. One thing I felt that was really lost with some of the movements before the 2016 election was they didn't make voting a bigger priority, which is what is changing. And now you're seeing a lot of these things being reversed and rolled back, that progress. And I always say it's better to even have the status quo than going backwards. And that's what it's all about. The Civil Rights Movement was all about legislation. It was about the Civil Rights Act of 1964. Jim Crow didn't end by itself. The Voting Rights Act, the crowning achievements of our democracy. So if we want to have legislation, and we will, we're working our way up on the local, state, and now the federal level, is to change these majorities in Congress, because 9 out of 10 Americans care about federal universal background checks, but our current president doesn't, and the current majorities in Congress don't. So we have to vote out those majorities with the new majority. Thank you.
Well, I think candidates should not just go up on a stage and tell people what they believe. A real candidate and leaders have to go out to every neighborhood in every community and talk to voters and everyone across the community, even if they're not old enough to vote, and hear the issues that are affecting them. Because people who really want to be a successful leader will lead for everyone and will listen to everyone and will make sure that their constituents' voices will be heard. And I think that's hard for many people to believe, that there will be people like that who will want to listen to what you want. And I think the barrier has been broken with that, because we have been so lucky to have so many good candidates out there talking to people and hearing what they have to say instead of just telling them what they want them to hear. And so it's easier to reach across to younger voters when you make them feel like they could be heard. And so that is the biggest issue that many people believe, is that their voice doesn't matter and that their vote doesn't matter because no one is reaching out to them. But when you go out and you talk to them about why these elections matter and why you need these candidates, then they'll actually go out and they'll vote. And they'll vote the way that they want to, not the way that the candidate told them they should, but because the way they want to. So I think just having an open dialogue and making it easier for constituents to talk to leaders.
If you want to inspire young people, or anyone for that matter, to vote, you need a candidate who's not going to fight for the lesser evil, but the greater good. And if you want a candidate who's going to do that, you got to get money out of politics. Because so long as our politicians are bought and paid for by the NRA, Raytheon, Boeing, you name it, that's who they're going to, those interests they're going to fight for in Congress, in your state legislature, wherever they happen to get elected to. So that is what has to fundamentally change. And you're not going to have that kind of change until there's more voices in the political scene entirely. Because so long as there are two groups of people, both of whom benefit from having the system the way that it is, there's not going to be any other kind of voice to challenge that narrative, to challenge the money in politics, to fight for that greater good. So that's what fundamentally has to change. Both the Democratic and Republican parties used to have very different views on gun control. You can go back and you can find videos of Ronald Reagan talking about how he's okay with an assault weapons ban. And you can find Democrats talking about that. We used to have one. But that changed. That changed because of the influence of money in politics, which benefits both parties. And that changed because it was easier to just kind of gerrymander the districts. That happens a lot in Virginia. Than it was to actually try to reach out to voters and get them to vote for you and make a courageous stand on the right thing to do. So until that changes, until the political system changes, there's basically nothing anybody else can do. And it's people who are going to try to change that system that are going to inspire the most people to come out and vote.
What I truly think is that it's really important to actually meet and hear the people who are running. So, and even your current senators, your current delegates who are representing you. I was just at Senator Warner's discussion on the SCOTUS pick, and I haven't actually met him, but I've sent him many emails. And I think that this is really important, that even if you are not getting the opportunity to actually meet your senators, the people who are representing you, always be active, sign petitions, write them emails, write them letters. I mean, when we actually did the walkout for Parkland, a group of my friends and I, we didn't just spend the day doing whatever, going to the mall. We actually all sat down and wrote letters to our senators for the rest of the day. Yeah, right? So. So these are really important things to take into account, to actually be corresponding with the people who are representing you and to make sure that they're coming and interacting with you. I mean, just like Louis said, like, you want to make sure that they're representing you. They're not taking their own views and just running. They're talking to every single part of all of the communities that they are representing, And they are representing that. They are representing your ideas. They are not representing their own. They are representing your ideas. If you want to run and you want to represent your district, your ideas should correspond with your district. I mean, I feel like that's just common sense. But yeah, I mean, that's about it. Thank you.
So our next question is for Matt. How have you collaborated with other communities affected by gun violence?
I think something that we have to constantly remind ourselves of is that this is not only a school safety issue, and this goes so far beyond just Parkland. Our struggle is one against all forms of gun violence. The normalized gun violence that's occurring every day in communities of color that Ramon was just talking about, the gun violence that takes place in schools and universities like Virginia Tech. We have to tackle all of this, and part of the road to change has been grouping in those different backgrounds, those different perspectives. We are creating a wide-tented coalition to take down gun violence and make sure that all of us are safe.
So back to your point, Matt, about the collective and bringing everybody under the tent, because everybody and this panel has perhaps a different experience of gun violence, how do we come together? What are the ways that we can build those coalitions and begin to have those conversations across those experiences? And that's for the whole group to answer.
I think understanding that we all have the same pain in our hearts when we hear these stories. Understanding that no matter what color you are, no matter where you come from, no matter what socioeconomic stance you are, we all have the same blood, we cry the same tears. And I think finding the fundamental basis of what we all want, wanting to live, we want, I'm sure, wait, how many of you are parents? Raise your hand. Well, thank you for coming, because when you come here today, when you have these conversations, you are fighting for your kids, you are fighting for your friends, and you are fighting for yourselves. But when we realize that we all want the same thing, no matter what side you're on of this debate, when we want the same thing, we want to survive, that's when we find common ground, because we realize that living and letting people survive and helping people thrive is why we're here. It's not about a piece of metal. It's about living and being able to be happy and grow old.
I want to go beyond simple politics for a minute, just to talk about just simple, like, violence prevention programs. As these programs have existed for decades now in cities all over the country, and one that I am most surprised by is definitely Life Camp in Jamaica, Queens, founded by a woman named Erica Ford, who's been fighting this fight for a very long time, in which her organization actually has violence interrupters that go into communities and diffuse violent situations before they can get to that point where it's irreversible, where somebody is killed or where somebody is vastly injured, and stuff like that should exist in every city in America. And we are building these coalitions to support programs like that. Life Camp with Erica Ford is funded by the city of New York. I can't say the same for violence interrupters and violence prevention programs in Chicago. I can't say the same for those in Austin, Texas. I can't say the same for those in Richmond, Virginia. I can say that there are people doing that great work, and it is up to us to find them and to support them in this fight, because they are the ones on the ground where we can fight to vote and we can fight for different legislators as much as we need, but this is a ground battle, because violence is something that is in our communities, and it is not just in the ballot box.
I think whenever you're talking to somebody about this issue, even those who disagree, you have to strip away the politics from it. This is more than anything a moral issue, and you should never forget the human stakes that we're dealing with here. These are people's lives on the line. That's the ramification of these policies and these votes and these elections. It's the life of people. And when we've gone to rallies and we've talked to counter-protesters, when we focus on that, on the life aspect, you can find common ground. When you strip away this falsehood that we want to take guns away or abolish the Second Amendment, when you get past the myth to the core of why we're doing this, you can find middle ground and you can build a bigger coalition.
And something that we learn while traveling the country and interacting with, people who disagree with us and counter protesters, and we have those conversations with them, we end up finding out that we actually agree on a lot of things. And something that we all have in common is we want to protect our loved ones. Right? Everyone wants to protect someone they care about, and nobody wants to lose somebody to gun violence. And when you tell somebody, that we're working towards gun violence prevention, it's hard to say no to that. And it's hard for someone to say, well, I don't want to prevent I don't want to prevent gun violence. That's a little, unhumane. And the beauty of the road to change is that, we're not going to win this with politics. We're going to win this with unity, love, and peace. We're going to win this with conversations. And and through all the conversations I've had, it starts off with them having the big misconception that, oh, you guys want to ban all guns, you guys want to take away my guns. We go, no, we want to protect your children. We want to protect you, your loved ones. We're trying to find a middle ground where we can protect all of our children, all of our country. We want to work together to make sure that we have a safer country for all. And then they go, oh, well, and then we start having more of a conversation, and then we get so close to agreeing on things. And, most of the time we can't get there. But lots of the time, we continue that communication. I have a story in Texas where this man came with his son, and we got into not a debate and not an argument, but a conversation, and we came this close to agreeing on safe storage. And what we did is we exchanged numbers, and to this day we still continue to communicate with each other, continuing that conversation, continuing to have that dialogue and that communication, because that's the only way we're going to create change. It's not about picking Democrat or Republican, but it's about saving the lives of children, and that's what we're going to win, with unity, peace, and love.
So the next question for all of our panelists: why is it vital to keep suicides by firearm a part of this gun violence conversation?
So 60% of all gun deaths in the United States are from suicide by gun. And I think it's important to remember, as we've said so many times here today, if we only attacked one part of gun violence, if we only talked about mass shootings, we would be failing not only ourselves, but all of us.
I just want to add on to the topic of suicide and suicide by gun. For the most part, a statistic found that about 9 out of 10 times if you're trying to commit suicide by gun, you will die. And for those who survive, they typically do not try to commit suicide again. And suicide by firearm is far more deadly than any other case, especially from drug overdoses or jumping off small bridges or things of that nature. What we need to do is enact some form of legislation that can protect these people from such things. And one of that is the red flag laws, in which through due process you are allowed to check somebody who is a clear and present danger to themselves or others, and they are temporarily restrained from those firearms. And it has shown in the states that it has been enacted to save lives. This legislation has been shown to actually save lives and protect those who might have been at risk. And to have that not at the federal level is just threatening countless other people who are this close to just harming themselves or others. And I can tell you of one instance in which these laws have protected those in my own home state. The University of Central Florida is a huge university in which tens of thousands of people attend, and there was a plot to shoot up that school. And because of this legislation, those who knew that that person was a danger were able to prevent him, and his firearms were seized for the time being, and he was brought into questioning, in which he was found guilty of conspiring to shoot up the school. This legislation not being enacted in any community is a threat to every community.
Southwest Virginia, I want to know how many of y'all know this. Southwest Virginia has the highest rate of gun violence in all of the state. How many of y'all knew that? See, and that is not a lot of people. And what maybe, well, isn't surprising, but is scary that majority of that is due to suicides. And that's a problem. And if only a handful of people knew that, that means there's so many other people who don't know that. And so if we start telling our neighbors and our elected officials and just anyone that this is a problem and I want to see a change, and how do we make it easier to have access to counselors and other things of that nature without having a 6-month waiting period? And I think once we have that conversation, then people will start to notice that this is a problem, and laws may be changed and bills may be passed, but it just starts with a conversation. And this is a big problem, and not just all across the country, but here too. And that's really scaring that statistic. So I hope that we could talk about it.
I think that's the right question to ask. Part of the answer has to be limiting access to firearms. The other part, like you said, has to be access to counselors. Can you, if you need to, can you access mental health services? And for the millions, tens of millions of Americans who lack health insurance, the answer is no. And if you are poor, if you're a person of color, you're more likely to not have access to those services. So unless we have a universal health care system in which every single American has access to mental health services, you're never going to see a huge reduction in suicide rates. That just has to be a necessary part of this conversation.
I think this has been an amazing conversation with all the panelists here, and I want to give you guys a chance to ask the panelists questions, but first, I have 2 very important questions for you guys. 1, do you like my shirt? Well, we have a merch table outside where we sell our March for Our Lives t-shirts, but listen, this shirt's pretty cool. You see the barcode, the scan code right here? If you scan it with your phone, it takes you to marchforourlives.com where you can online register to vote. Yes, amazing. And my second question is, raise your hand if you have a phone. I heard someone's phone going off earlier, so don't lie. So take that phone out for me, please. Everyone's taking their phone out. Everyone's hand went up. If you want to keep in contact with March for Our Lives and get updates, text CHANGE to 97779, change, 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 to 97779. Thank you.
We've got a full house here, and it's going to be really, I know there's lots of people who have a lot of questions for our panelists who have shared a lot of really great things already. We do have some cards for those of you who can't necessarily get up and maneuver, and also we won't all get to ask our questions. What I would ask today is that just as we have been so inspired by these young voices, we make a lot of space for our young voices in this room to ask questions and seek inspiration as well. And this also is not an opportunity to make statements or endorse candidates or market your wares from stepping out tomorrow. So what we would really ask is that if you would like to ask a question, that you either queue behind one of these microphones, and we'll take questions back and forth on that until it's time to go. We do have to be out of here by 5 o'clock, so we'll have to wrap in time, so it doesn't give us a ton of time for that. And if you would like to write it down, even if you don't get to ask it, we will make sure that our panelists get your questions, and so that they can be able to consider it and even share it with other communities. So who has the cards, if people need cards? At the back, there's cards. Raise your hand if you want a card, and somebody will come around. Otherwise, you can start queuing up at the microphones.
Hi. Okay. As I'm an aspiring journalist, I would really like to know what you wish how the media reacts to something like that?
I think in any situation, and I've experienced this a lot, the media, I mean, it's their job to cover us, but I think you becoming a journalist, first of all, thank you. We need more committed, honest journalists. But I think, we really do. But I think the biggest thing I would tell you is if you end up covering any event that's a tragedy, put yourself in their shoes. Because after my school shooting happened, there were people right after trying to interview my friends right after we ran out of our school. So put yourself in the shoes of whatever you're covering and then go from there.
Right now, there is a bias in the media towards white, affluent victims of gun violence, and that's the reality of it. And we hope that that changes. Part of the road to change, we are using our platform to amplify people of color who have experienced gun violence. And all of us who are in positions of privilege need to do the same. Use our platforms to elevate people of color who have experienced this firsthand.
I would like to say just one last thing, a campaign that our own David Hogg, Lauren's brother, has been working on with members of the media. It is a campaign called No Notoriety. It is for those who commit these heinous acts, those who commit these acts of violence over the people should not be plastered all over every single station. Now, I know that for those of you who would want to know the names of these individuals and to know exactly what happened, it is very well in your right, and they will report on that, but it is up to us to hold them accountable, to make sure they don't glorify these individuals. They do not make them infamous through their heinous acts and through their acts of violence, because right now we have an instance in our country where there are those who are copycat killers. There are those who feel that if one person got away with it, they too can become important in our society if they commit these acts of violence. And it is up to us to make sure that those individuals never see the light of day.
I'm a student at Auburn High School, and I try to bring as much change in my own school as I can, but some people kind of just shut down as soon as they hear gun control. What would your advice be for opening up conversation with people kind of on the other side of this issue?
So 2 things. When you talk to them, instead of saying gun control, use the term gun violence prevention, because that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to prevent gun violence. And my second tip to you is always bring it back to the human aspect. Remind them that you want to feel safe in your school. I mean, you want to feel safe sitting in your desk. You want to feel safe going to a concert, to a church, to a movie. Just bring it back to the human aspect and remind them that we're not trying to do anything crazy. We're not trying to take your guns away, which is such a misunderstanding by so many people. We just want common sense gun legislation so all of us can live happy lives.
And one thing I found is if you use other terms, like she said, like gun reform and gun safety, that helps as well. And to also bring up policies that are more common that everyone can more so agree on. Like I said, 9 or 10 Americans agree with universal background checks. Start there, because there's a lot of Americans that on the other side that are even a little hesitant about that. So start out slow and then get a little deeper into the policies and how they affect everybody.
This is not a controversial issue. 97% of people support universal background checks. Over 60% of people support an assault weapons ban, which is one of the more extreme versions of our platform, right? So you have to strip away the lies. The reason why people say that we want to take guns away or want to abolish the Second Amendment is because they cannot debate us on the grounds of universal background checks. They need to slice and dice us up in order to hold power, and we have to overcome that.
First off, if this question does not make sense, I apologize. I personally am a big advocate for mental health. I was part of the executive board for Active Minds at Virginia Tech, who focuses on breaking the stigma around mental health. And I guess my question for you guys, a lot of the mass shootings and any shootings, putting aside the 60% suicide, that statistic we discussed, are presumed to be mentally ill people. And I kind of guess my question for you guys was, is there really any way that, oh, I think I forgot my question. It's just basically, it's a very common assumption that automatically anybody who's done a mass shooting is presumed to be mentally ill. And I just kind of wanted to get your guys' take on that, if I can. If not, that's fine, I'll go sit down. But yeah, it's kind of a very large stigma and a big assumption, and I'm not out here to say that, you know, shooting a lot of people is okay in any way, shape, or form, but...
We understand your question.
Okay, thank you.
So when, I'll start. I know he wanted to talk about this as well. Just that stigma is very apparent in our society, and we have to break that down. I can tell you that after the shooting at our high school and after several other shootings that we have watched the coverage for, they like to say things like crazy. Yes. And you can't measure crazy. You can't physically measure crazy as a statistic. You can't say, well, this individual was just crazy. Like, to say that is to write them off. To say that is to write off all of the other factors that built up that situation. And I'd like to briefly touch on the other instance in which people say things like mental disabilities, because there are plenty of people with mental disabilities that aren't prone to violence. I know plenty of individuals who they might have acute Asperger's, or they may have autism, or they may have any form of mental disability such as that, and they are mostly social, but they are not violent. They are not a danger to our community, and we have to make sure that that argument ends there. Because when somebody says, oh, well, if somebody has a mental disability, they shouldn't own a gun, well, that's not something that we can say. That's not something that we can define at this moment and at this time, because there aren't those violent individuals out there. What we have to do is make sure that those making those arguments actually have their facts straight. Because you can easily say somebody is crazy after they shoot up a bunch of people, because that shouldn't be a normal thing. But you can't just say that they became crazy because of that, because then that's just, again, writing off the problem. So I'm going to let him take the rest of this, because I know he really wanted to say something.
Well, if you look at the statistics, less than 5% of violent crimes are committed by people who have a mental illness. But about 20% of Americans at any given time, and the number is higher if you count somebody throughout their entire life, have a mental illness, right? So that's actually underrepresentation in terms of violent crime. So I think the answer to this specific media kind of nonsense, where they always frame it in terms of mental illness, can be best solved by just kind of acknowledging that it's a very common thing. A lot of people suffer from mental illness. And if you do, doesn't matter what mental illness you suffer from, you are more likely to be a threat to yourself than to any other person. And I think a universal health care system that ensures everybody has access to that would reduce some of the stigma. But I also think it's important to acknowledge just how prevalent those things are. I've suffered from clinical depression. Almost every single one of the people I grew up with has suffered from clinical depression and has attempted suicide. This is a very common thing. And the younger you are, the higher the prevalence is, in part because we have better techniques now that we didn't have then. So it's a very common thing. And as soon as it's recognized as something that affects everybody, as something that affects everybody that you know, it'll work out the same way that the LGBT rights movement worked out, where people are like, I know somebody who is LGBT, I can't hate that person. And they'll say, I know somebody who has a mental illness, I know that this person is not a violent person. And when that changes, the rest of it will change.
Thank you, guys.
Hi, my name is Francesca Shaver. I'm a 16-year-old, and I'm a rising senior at Blacksburg High School.
And my dream is to become a politician so I can represent you guys and the other voices that may not be heard.
Thank you, we need it.
And I was wondering how I can get more involved in not only my community, but my state and my country. So is there anything I could join or take part of so my voice could be heard?
First, you have to start at the community level. You have an election, a federal election coming up in 96 days. You have a special election for the House of Delegates in December, which could decide who controls the House. So what you should do from now until then is knock doors, phone bank, figure out how you can volunteer on a campaign. Start from the ground up. That's how we're going to get change, not from the top down.
Yeah. Can I still answer the question, or is she on? Well, if anyone else was feeling that way, I would say is to join an organization related to the issues that you can start to build political networking and understanding, because you don't have to know everything about politics to join in. We're still very young, and we're learning policy and stuff over time. We're all learning, like with Chris's election. It was all experimental, but now we have a routine. We have a schedule. We know what we're going to do. We went from being non-existent on our campus to winning Best Upcoming Chapter at the Virginia Young Democrats. And we're aiming for Best Chapter next year, and we went from having a very conservative local government to electing the most progressive local government in our city's history, yes. Voting every single Trump NRA conservative out of office. So, well, all I can say is that don't give up hope. I was very skeptical, but it turned out to be actually the best life decision to get involved, because you're actually making a change. It's not enough, again, to protest. We have to elect leaders who are going to implement the policies that we want. That's how things become about.
Hi, I'm Kate Staten. I'm from Lynchburg, Virginia. I'm the leader of the Central Virginia chapter of Students Demand Action. In my community, the private school, the teachers are armed. The college students are allowed to open carry. I was wondering how I could engage people in such a conservative community. If you had any tips on that?
I mean, I think the easiest way to engage someone, of course, is going up to them and having a conversation with them. And having conversations with people who don't necessarily agree with you is what we need in this country. You can't progress if you only surround yourself in an echo chamber of your opinions.
Well, we have a no-card question here for our panelists. What do you plan to do about young children in homes where they are taught the wrong ideas about owning and using guns? How can we help to re-educate them?
Well, I don't know how to define exactly what the wrong teaching is, as it wasn't really expressed in the question, but I can say that we live in a time and age where we can just research the whole of human information in the palm of our hand through our cell phones, through things like tablets, and just through the internet as a whole. We are able to find anything and everything we need. So as far as education goes, the tools are out there. It is up to those individuals and those in the community to reach out and to look out for this information, to see what is right and what is wrong, because maybe in a certain household the parents may want to teach the kids a certain way, or maybe there's certain programming that they are watching that is teaching you a certain way. And like Lauren said, we cannot live in an echo chamber. We cannot just rely on one form of information or one source of information. I don't know if many of you have seen, but the President of the United States the other day believes that we need identification to buy groceries. Now I can tell you, just by typing in just that phrase into Google, you will find hundreds and hundreds of results instantly that say no. So to listen to one form of information, be it somebody that you may respect or be it somebody that you may neglect, you need to realize that you need to look at all of it to determine what is actually true and what is actually factual.
My name is Chris Hurst. I'm the delegate for the 12th District.
I can tell you've been doing a good job.
I've only been in office 7 months. They're like, what bills are you going to do? I say, Bill who? I don't know what you're talking about. So I am privileged to be able to represent more college students than anybody else in Virginia's General Assembly. Between Radford University and Virginia Tech, I represent more than 40,000 college students. Unfortunately, I heard from our police chief here, Tony Wilson, who is a marvelous police chief, really helped make sure that Virginia Tech survived the shooting after 2007, was able to eventually thrive as a result of it. He said that he had heard information from Virginia Tech that there was a student survey for our largest incoming freshman class in tech history. It's also the loneliest class in Virginia Tech history. Isolationism is now a distinct phenomenon among so many young people. The incidence of diagnosed clinical mental illness among the youth is starting to grow. Our first, oftentimes people who are schizophrenic, the first symptom that they will ever show will be while they're in a college or post-18-year-old setting. What should we be demanding of our schools and of our administrators at universities and colleges, policy-wise or just on campus and at your school, to make it so that we address this problem of loneliness and depression that is unfortunately so pervasive among our youth today?
One idea is, instead of arming student resource officers, how about we put more counselors in school? Recently, my school district, Roanoke, they wanted to have armed resource officers, and that got passed, and so now we're going to have it upcoming years. But if they look at the statistics, like I said earlier, how Southwest Virginia is #1 in gun violence, and majority of that is in suicide. So if we look at that and see that maybe maybe we should reach out to those who are struggling with mental illness but don't know how to express it. They don't know what's going on, and it could feel like the end of the world. So talking to students is #1 for like any issue that's surrounding students, but looking at statistics is another big one. But more counselors would be the most ideal solution to all of this.
I think the first step is demanding recognition. Demand these schools and these colleges to recognize that this is an issue, and this is something that so many people are affected by. And the second thing is, creating an open dialogue is paramount in creating this positive and I can't talk today. I'm so sorry. Lessening the stigma that surrounds mental illness. There we go. Yeah, I can't talk, I'm so sorry. But creating this open dialogue and showing people that being mentally ill does not make you violent, it makes you a person with an illness.
So right now, we have a healthcare facility on campus. A lot of you are probably familiar with it. It's McComas Hall. If you go there and you say, I have a problem, they refer you to an outside specialist that you have to pay for. And if you don't have health insurance, you can't afford that. So even if we had more counselors, the counselors who are there are not trained to actually do that kind of talk therapy, to prescribe medication if that's necessary. And beyond that, so I'm a graduate student at Tech, and if I want to qualify for the healthcare plan there, I have to pay a $500 deductible. But I also have to pay $1,500 in student fees, which comes out of my paycheck, $200 every paycheck. So I can't afford that much money to actually get the healthcare, even though the university pays for a good portion of it. So President Sands, if you're listening, here's 2 things you can do to ensure that you address gun violence and mental health in your campus. Find and pay for affordable counselors that can actually do the kind of prescription medication, that can do the kind of talk therapy. That means people can go to McComas and get the kind of treatment they need at no cost to them. And then ensure that you cover all the costs for graduate students, so that way everybody in the university has access to the mental health that they need. Mental health treatment.
I don't mean to be that person, but due to time, we ask that only one panelist answers questions, so we'll continue on.
Hi, my name is Tina Tapp, and I'm a local high school teacher, and I have a large group of high school students here that... And you talked about apathy and students getting involved, and so these kids are not apathetic. I think that they are getting woke, trying to be cool. But sometimes high school kids don't know what to do, and so you've addressed that a little bit. And so I guess the first thing that I'll say is, number 1, do you guys know that you are heroes, because they're really looking up to you? And so the second part of that question is, with young people that are trying to get involved, trying to figure out what steps to take, especially the local ones, Roanoke, I know there's some Auburn people and stuff like that, but we're just trying to get started. And my curiosity, I know RU is involved in helping, but we would love help from everybody from all over the world to get us inspired. And are you guys willing to stay connected to young people that want to get active?
Well, that's one thing that we're thinking of doing, because this district is the size of New Jersey. Even if we do everything right, if other components and young people in colleges and high schools don't do what they're supposed to do, the results might not be in our favor. So we need to ignite that change, what we're doing everywhere. And I think what makes us different from not just so many Young Democrats organizations, but many other organizations, that elections are our #1 and primary focus. And as long as you seek out campaigns, look up, if you have an issue and you look up policies and it relates to that campaign, just sign up and volunteer and form, a consensus, a group of people, and it looks like you guys already have it, around that issue, and just start, over time trying to set up a routine, a schedule. That's what we did. It was just, we revamped it and we tried different things over time, but now we have a set strategy, ideas, plans, and things of that nature. So that's what I would do. And for the rest of my life, I'm going to dedicate to progressive causes, no matter what. I think it's really important. Thank you. I'm so proud, and I hope you guys keep it up, and I hope you guys form that organization, hopefully a Young Democrats organization, and we'll help you.
I will say, from a National March for Our Lives perspective, just give us contact info. We'd be happy to be connected with you. We'd be happy to continue those relationships as we've built. What? Yeah, talk to us after for all that. And just one other piece of advice for those under the voting age in a high school. One thing that could really just help people get out to the polls, and it is a trouble for some to get out to the polls, is just simple carpooling. Being able to come together and have a group of students be willing to maybe drive some individuals of the community to make sure that they can all go out and vote and actually participate in that civic duty, because there are plenty of 16-year-olds out there who are really invigorated but can't vote at the time being. So that's just one suggestion that we have.
have another card question that's related to this. It says, have you had a chance to talk with teachers about their needs in relation to providing students a safe environment and that sort of, preventing school shootings? And if so, what do teachers need and how could this community support that?
So, first of all, thank you to anybody in the audience who's a teacher. I come from a family of teachers, and I've talked to, yes. But we have had the opportunity to talk to many teachers from all across the United States about their feelings towards this. But something I want you guys to remember is that teachers are there to be our educators, not our security guards. And I know so many teachers look at their students as their children, but we need all of the community's support to stand behind these teachers and to tell not only your friends, not only the people who agree with you, but our government, our politicians, that our teachers are to educate us, not to save our lives. They shouldn't have to do that.
Thank you. My name is Mike Clemens. I want to take a brief moment to apologize to my neighbors for my phone going off. I didn't realize that was me. I'm a counselor in training, starting social work at Radford University this fall. My mother is a counselor and came here to Virginia Tech after our incident some years ago. My question is about mental health and getting help for it. I am quite aware that, at least here in Virginia, there are two ways to get help. You seek it out yourself, or a court orders it. And I'm wondering, do you think this should be changed, and what can we do if you do agree with that? Thank you.
I would like to say, like I said before, having an open dialogue, and I do agree with you, I think, as I said before, we need to lessen the stigma surrounding mental health because so many people are affected by it. And because we're not educated in our schools about it, kids come out of school not knowing why they feel the way they do. They come out of school scared and they feel neglected, they feel isolated, they feel like they're different than everybody else. But having this open dialogue and talking with your kids, talking with your friends, talking with your teacher, your students about mental health, and showing them that it's something that's not something to feel ashamed of, showing them that it's something to find help, something to talk about, something not to be scared to talk about. I think doing that, first of all, and then continuing to teach them to look for the signs in their friends, to having open conversations, and to not be scared of people with mental illness, or not be scared of yourself if you feel like you may have a mental illness.
And I don't want to be that person again, but due to time, we can only take 2 more questions. So
I loathe the NRA, but one of the reasons why I'm hesitant to get behind gun reform legislation is my fear that it will be used in a racially discriminatory fashion and it will contribute to the over-policing of communities of color. This is why Killer Mike wouldn't endorse the March for Our Lives, and we've seen that rhetoric about keeping weapons out of the hands of dangerous people contributed to stop and frisk, which was racially discriminatory. And my question is how policing reform ties into the gun issue for you, and what is being done to prevent any future gun control legislation from being used in a prejudicial fashion. Thank you.
Well, as we know, back when the Black Panther Party was first founded, Governor Reagan during the time supported gun control because black men were using the Second Amendment to protect themselves and protect their community. And, they were practicing their Second Amendment right. And I see your point. And an interesting fact I learned the other day is the NRA actually trains the NYPD and many different police officers around the country and inner cities how to shoot guns. And that, to me, is shocking because the NRA is teaching police officers how to shoot a gun and how to aim better, which usually is to take a life, instead of learning how to mediate violence more. And the fact that there's more funding towards learning how to kill someone instead of learning how to solve an issue and work within your community isn't right to me. And, as we know, states like New York and states like Chicago, which a lot of people like to argue has some of the strongest gun reform laws within the country. Like Chicago, there's countries like Indiana, which is a state right next to the border of Chicago, which has very weak gun laws. And that is because the NRA keeps a tight lock on making sure that the elected officials and politicians there do not enact the gun reform and gun policies that the country desperately needs. And those guns start to flow into Chicago, where it goes into the inner cities, and that's where most of the gun violence comes from those arms flowing into the inner cities. And with more gun reform and more gun violence prevention policies, I think we will actually see a reduce in gun violence, and we'll see less racism, and we'll have a chance to actually stop guns from flowing into inner cities and stop guns from getting into the wrong hands, and really start focusing on how we can get to the issue of violence in the whole, which goes back to funding, which goes back to focusing on policies like health care for all, solving poverty and housing, and making sure that students have the resources they need, making sure that we focus on counseling, and making sure they have the resources to get to college, and making sure that they're graduating in cap and gowns and not ending up in caskets. And I think it all starts with just tackling this issue one by one, but it is going to take fighting against the NRA and making sure that they're not working with our politicians over special interest and money over the lives of kids.
Okay, so I'm really short, but I'm trying really hard to talk into the microphone. So recently, very recently, the Trump administration signed a policy that allows legal printing of 3D guns. And that's just really scary because those guns are untraceable and undetectable when it goes through the airplane security. It's just undetectable at all. So how can we prevent that development? I guess that's just my question.
I'm just going to say, in regards to 3D printed weapons and the entire case that's been developing, recently a judge has blocked the downloads of that. That is a federal judge, was the only one to take action. When Congress attempted to take action, the Senate voted it down very abruptly, without even taking time to actually talk it out and realize the threat to national security that it poses. One thing that definitely would help is the modernization of the Undetectable Firearms Act of 1988, which was designed for when firearms were starting to be built with other materials beyond metal. They started to realize that they were going through metal detectors undetected, and Congress at the time took action. They formed legislation to combat it, and now they are refusing to form any further legislation to combat now more modern issues. Now the good news is 3D printers at the current moment are still a little expensive, and we can hope that if gun manufacturers like the money that they receive from selling these firearms, whether it be to dangerous individuals or law-abiding citizens, if they like that money, they too will fight against 3D printed guns because they are manufactured in the home, in which the only people who get the money is whoever made that plastic. And for this fight, it is a very difficult battle, because I will say at the current moment 2,000 downloads were made of the AR-15 style of weapon. And for that to be an undetectable weapon, all we have to do is make sure that law enforcement is aware of this. We need to make sure that those are held accountable who have these plans, who are spreading these plans. And until we add that accountability to an issue like this, or to any issue, we are allowing those to get away with murder. And we cannot allow that in our society, and we need to make sure that these plans, such as with 3D weapons, that they are held at the utmost importance, because something like this is scary. To know that something can go undetected through a metal detector, to know that this can be in any aspect of our society and you will not know until the trigger is pulled. What we have to do is train threat assessment. We need to improve our intelligence agencies and stop attacking those like the FBI and the CIA, and actually encourage those to take action against this.
And I'm sorry, I have to add on to that. I find it absolutely sick that in a time where 96 people die every day by gun violence in this country, we now have to worry about 3D printed guns. To me, that just seems, that's just wrong and sick. And I think this is why we're here now, because as we continue this fight, there's going to be barriers and there's going to be challenges that continue to jump in front of us. But right here in this room and across the country where we continue to have these town halls and rallies, we have an energy of people ready to continue that fight. And I know a lot of people thought that this movement was going to die a long time ago, but we're still here and we're still traveling the country, and we're going to make sure that we vote out those politicians who do not agree with the safety of our children. Vote them out! Vote them out! Vote them out! Vote them out!
Vote them out! Vote them out!
Wow. Can we get another round of applause for our great panelists for today? And I don't know about you, citizens of Blacksburg, but I'm very inspired. I want you to take the conversation that we had and push this movement on. And that concludes our town hall. Thank you for letting us come for Road to Change.
Just a quick thing for anybody here who didn't have their question answered. We are still in the building. We may be kicked out, but we can continue the conversation and answer questions for those who still have them. Thank you.